Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Brown. I'm the Director of Events and Education for Trade Press Media Group. And thank you for joining us for today's webcast, Top of the Line Protection, Stronger ROI for Your Roof. Our presenter today is Michael Cronin, Director of Product Management at Georgia-Pacific. In his 23 plus years with Georgia-Pacific, Michael has held multiple leadership roles, focusing on solving customer problems and delivering market-based solutions through innovation, new product development. Michael's actively involved in the single-ply roofing industry, the Roofing Industry Committee on Weather Issues, and his local International Institution of Building Envelope Consultants chapter. In today's webcast, our learning objectives include learning about the benefits of using a covered board on a roof, understand how cover boards can mitigate risks, and review operations and maintenance costs and performance. Before we get started with today's webcast, I'd like to cover just a few details about today's event. A live question and answer session will follow today's presentation. And to submit your questions, please navigate to the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type in your questions. Our presenter will answer as many questions as time permits. At the conclusion of today's webcast, you'll receive a copy of the PDF of today's presentation slides, and you'll also receive a link to a brief online assessment. Upon successful completion of this assessment, you'll receive a CEU certification transcript that you can use to self-report. Today's webcast will also be archived at facilitiesnet.com/webcast. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. As Amy said, my name is Michael Cronin, and I'll be talking to you today about how a rigid cover board can provide numerous benefits to your low slope roofing system. So among those key benefits include lowering the total cost of ownership, mitigating risk and giving you peace of mind, and extending the life of your roofs. So these are just a few of the benefits. So let's get right into it. So being a facility professional, whether you're a building owner or facility manager, is not an easy job. You got a lot on your plate. You have to prioritize resources and expenses on a daily basis. You got to deal with and worry about budgets, people, maintenance, all utilities, janitorial, training, uniforms, vehicles, capital projects, complaints from tenants. That the list goes on. And you even have to worry about that next storm that's forecasted to hit your, depending on, what's the state of your roof and that you're managing. So you got to balance all these things while also ensuring that there's no disruption in the operation or the daily life of anyone in your facility. Definitely not an easy task. So our GYPSUM Insights group recently conducted a series of conversations with facility managers from across the United States with varying levels of asset responsibilities. Some of these guys oversaw individual buildings or a couple of buildings, while others directed, massive medical and university campuses. So the quote on the page we thought was pretty interesting because it was from one of those conversations with a facility manager of a large campus in the Chicago area, a large university campus. So he said, if I blow my budget, then I'm going to be fired. In my life as a facilities executive, if I impact our student or our ability for faculty to deliver academics, then I'm going to be fired. If I impact our researchers and damage an experiment because something went wrong in the building environment, then I'm going to be fired. Those are givens with everybody in my role. We all understand that. So we thought this statement, while being perhaps a bit extreme, gave a really good glimpse into what keeps facility managers up at night. So in our conversations with these facility professionals, the feedback they gave to the topic of, quote, what keeps you up at night, can be broadly summarized by the words on the page. And, to summarize, it's things such as, managing and staying on budget, thinking about their workers and the labor that they have, whether it's around, their safety and how their work, as well as just the problem of finding skilled labor. And then things, big categories, things that it can affect the structural soundness of their buildings, such as water, fire, and weather-related events. So as I mentioned when we started, we want to spend some time talking about the roof of your buildings and sharing information about how using a cover board can be a benefit to give you peace of mind and help you address some of your concerns, at least when it comes to your roof. So in addition to conversations with facility managers, early this year, Georgia Pacific partnered with FMI Corporation to conduct a third-party assessment of roofing systems that have been replaced in the last 5 years. So what the data showed was that when compared to similar roof systems with a cover board, single-ply systems that did not have a cover board had anywhere from 35 to 65% higher annual operating and maintenance costs. They had more issues over the life of the roof, and when those issues did surface, they were often significantly more expensive to fix. So we'll touch on this subject a little bit more when we get to the benefits versus cost section a little bit later. So in addition to operating and maintenance costs, some other future considerations you might want to keep in mind for your next roofing project, whether that's a re-roof or if you're putting up a new buildings, are things like future weather hazards. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next few slides. Do you plan to add additional HVAC equipment or solar panels to your roof? In other words, will you be increasing maintenance traffic or adding additional equipment hazards to the roof? And any future considerations for converting roof space into things such as plaza decks or outdoor entertainment areas or garden areas. If you have any of these future considerations, then a cover board should be a consideration that you're looking at as well. So one of the topics that regularly came up when discussing what keeps facility professionals at night is weather events. So extreme weather and weather-related disasters, they seem to be a regular occurrence on the news these days. We're always hearing about unprecedented this and unprecedented that. But if we look back, since 1980, the U.S. has sustained 258 weather and climate disasters, where the overall damage costs reach or exceeded $1 billion, which is how they define a disaster. So the cumulative cost of these events for the past 40 years is around $1.8 trillion. So $1.8 trillion, but in the last 3 years, disaster costs were up 43% versus the previous 5-year average and up 76% versus the 20-year average. Disaster costs from just the years 2017, 18, and 19, so just 3 years, account for over 25% of the disaster-related costs going back to 1980. So these disasters have impacted states across the country, in addition to Caribbean territories that the U.S. has. So in a recent report on disaster since 1980, NOAA concluded that the number and cost of disasters are increasing over time due to a combination of factors that have been going up. Things such as exposure. So that's when we think of exposure, we think of the value at risk of possible loss. So you have more valuable assets that are in the way of these storms. The vulnerability, so how much damage does the storm intensity at a given location cause? And then the other big one that's affecting both of these is population growth. So the US population has doubled in the past 80 years. And then you've also got the issue around coastlines, where these days 40% of the US population live in coastal counties. So people live close to the water, and that's often where you get a lot more of some of these extreme weather events. So climate change was the other conclusion that they called out. And so they're saying that this is increasing the frequency of some of these types of extremes that lead to these billion-dollar disasters. So of the disaster since 1980, if you look on the page here, well, tropical cyclones are by far the most costly type of major disaster. And that's typically because those impact multiple states, at a time, and anywhere from hundreds to thousands of square miles of land area. Averaging over $21 billion per event. But severe storms, the bottom box you see there, they are the second most destructive, far less destructive per event, roughly 10% of what a cyclone causes when it's a disaster, but they're far more common, with 125 of those billion-dollar events occurring since 1980. So if you look on these maps, here you can see the relative scale and where some of these disasters cause their impacts. So you can see from maps, and as many people inherently know, different kinds of disasters strike in different places. For example, if you look at wildfires in California cost more than 3 times the cost of fires in the rest of the nation combined. So you can see that's a far more bigger issue, out there than, when you look at pretty much anywhere else in the country. But then when you look at natural disaster damage in states like Texas and Louisiana and Florida, it's pretty much, primarily related to tropical cyclones when you look at the scale of it. But there are severe storms that hit down in those areas as well. So NOAA, like I mentioned, only tracks disasters that cause at least $1 billion in damages, which is why we've been talking about them. So again, talking about this, trend that's been developing in the last 40 years, you can see that the number of billion-dollar events continues to grow. So since 2002, there's not been a single year with less than 5 major natural disasters. And since 2015, there's been at least 10 major disasters recorded each year. So as I mentioned a few slides ago, severe storms are the second most destructive category of disasters in the past 40 years. Less damage per event, but lots of these billion-dollar events, like I said, 125 since 1980. So this, if you look at this chart, this is insured losses. So insured losses for severe thunderstorms, or severe convective storms as meteorologists and researchers refer to them, nearly matches the losses for tropical cyclones if you look back all the way to 1960. So as you can see on the chart, injured losses for severe convective storms have been following in step pretty well with the increased frequency that we've been seeing of billion-dollar events, weather events occurring in the United States. So if you look closely at the chart, you'll see that since 2008, annual losses for severe convective storms has exceeded $10 billion per year. So you may not be in the bullseye for tropical storms, but severe storms cause disasters in virtually every state. So this is an update on where we're at in 2020 for billion-dollar disasters. So as of October 7th of this year, there have been 16 weather and climate-related disaster events with losses exceeding $1 billion to impact the U.S. So 11 of those were severe storms, including one derecho, which I had never heard of until this year, that devastated Iowa. And then there were 3 tropical cyclone events, Isaias, Laura, and Sally, that impacted the Gulf and the Atlantic coasts. And then, as if 2020 had not set enough records, the 16 events that occurred in the first 9 months of the year tie the record of 16 events that occurred in 2011 as well as in 2017. So in this latest update for 2020 from NOAA, they summarize that the current disaster season, again, further supports, elevated activity that's been seen in the past few years when it comes to disasters, indicating that this appears to be part of a larger upward trend. And another thing they concluded was that the data strongly suggests that natural disasters are increasing not only in frequency, but also in price tag. So many of the risks to your roofing system that are associated with these disasters can be mitigated or at least significantly reduced with the use of a rigid cover board. Adding a rigid cover board to your roof system will enhance the strength and durability. It can add resiliency to your roof for when the next disaster strikes. So, okay, increasing roof resiliency to withstand severe weather is definitely a very strong reason to include a cover board in your roof system. Another future consideration to keep in mind for your roof, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is do you think you may be looking to add solar panels, in the next 20 years, or maybe during the, the life cycle of your next roof? If the answer is yes, or even if it's even a maybe, including a rigid cover board in your system could help, quote unquote, future-proof your roof. So it does this by providing a solid substrate. So with word substrate, think good foundation, and an excellent fire protective layer for future solar projects. And depending on where in the country you are, that's maybe something you're already doing or considering, or maybe it's something that, may still seem that's too far in the future to worry about yet. So if this describes you, just consider that solar accounted for 40% of all new U.S. electricity generating capacity. So probably should have put new in front of that U.S. on the screen there to make that a little more clear. So 40% of all new capacity that was added in the U.S. in 2019. And thus far in 2020, in the first half, it's been 37% of all new electric generating capacity that's been added. So of that new solar capacity that's been added, 38% of that is non-residential. So what they're looking at right now for 2020 is roughly 1 gigawatt of solar that's being added. So the non-residential would be about 380 to 385 megawatts. So in total, the US solar market will be installing nearly 100 gigawatts of additional capacity in the years 21 to 25, which is 42% more than was installed over the last 5 years. So in other words, 40%, 42% more, it's growing. In other words, it's growing exponentially. So by 2025, the other new development that's happening is solar energy storage, because that's always been an issue. You're only developing energy when the sun shines. So by 2025, it's now expected that 1/5 of new PV systems, 1/3 residential solar systems, and up to 1/4 of new non-residential systems will be paired with energy storage, which is a game changer for solar, since, like I said, you can obviously only generate this type of power when the sun is shining. So pictured here is a rendering of a photovoltaic, or solar single-ply membrane roof assembly that includes a gypsum cover board used as a thermal barrier on the steel decks, which is labeled with the letter E in the picture, and as a cover board in position C. Low slope commercial roofs continue to be a very popular location for locating, solar systems for several reasons. They offer a nice, secure location with no access by the general public. So they're nice and private. You typically don't have to have a fence to keep people out. Roofs are also likely to have a, nice, clear, obstructed view of the sky. It allows for generation of energy close to the consumption point, since you're likely going to be using that energy in the building. And there's a large inventory of existing low slope buildings. So there's lots of real estate, essentially, lots of good flat roofs out there available for these systems. And in some urban areas, it's often the only available real estate that you have access to. So the roof is often where a lot of equipment goes, not only solar, but some other equipment, which we'll be talking about in a bit. So even though some of the federal incentives to build photovoltaic systems have been expiring, solar power really continues to be a popular alternative energy source. And a big reason for this is the new technologies that I mentioned with storage and that have really been driving down what was at one time just a prohibitive cost. So costs are coming down, and so it's getting a lot easier to get in the game, so to speak. So although PV solar systems are a great source of renewable energy, there are definitely hazards associated with placing them on a roof. And these hazards primarily include fire, how these panels react to wind, and then structural considerations for the weight of the panels themselves. So this results in several design-related challenges. By using a gypsum-based cover board and thermal barrier, it can really help in designing a roof assembly that meets the needed fire and wind uplift specifications for these type of systems. So the image that you see here is the remains of a roof assembly in Littlestown, Pennsylvania, after a PV-related fire. In the case of this fire, there was a faulty device that amplifies the direct current from that goes to the inverter, and it overheated and caught fire. Fortunately, in the case of this roof, they were able to detect it quickly and got a very quick response from the local fire department that kept the fire localized to the area that you see here, because it was a 100,000 square foot roof, so the damage was minimal. And this assembly included a metal deck, polyiso insulation, and a TPO membrane. So this is a very impressive solar installation. So this is an aerial view of Hewlett-Packard corporate headquarters in Silicon Valley, California. So 85% of this 300,000 square foot roof is covered with solar panels. So when they re-roofed to accommodate this massive system, they did include a half-inch glass mat gypsum board as a cover board to provide extra compressive strength, durability, and to enhance the fire resistance. So an additional consideration for this roof was the extra cost that would be associated with potentially having to remove portions of this PV system if they had to accommodate any kind of unscheduled roof maintenance or repair. So they did not want to have to go through that. So they actually brought in two separate roof consulting firms to partner together in an attempt to design a roof assembly that was virtually maintenance free and would have a lifespan that would be comparable to the PV system. So those consulting firms both agreed that a rigid cover board was needed for that system, and that's what was installed. So vegetative assemblies. So vegetative roof assemblies continue to grow in popularity due primarily for their ability to increase energy efficiency. They're very good at managing stormwater discharge. They reduce operational costs of the facility. They can enhance the visual appearance of the building. And they also help the building owner position themselves as being an environmentally friendly organization, not only to their community, but also to their employees. So current long-range analysis has indicated that there's been a 5 to 15% overall growth industry trend since 2013. Apparently that's not very clear to measure, but most consider that 5 to 15% growth is considered a conservative estimate. And so the top 10 areas for green roofs, number 1 is Washington, D.C., number 2 is Chicago, number 3 is Toronto, 4 New York City, 5 Seattle, number 6 is Vancouver, number 7, who would have known, South Bend, Indiana, number 8 is Boston, 9 Philadelphia, and number 10 is Baltimore. So that's where most of the green roofs are getting installed in recent history here. So looking at a vegetative roof assembly. So this is a rendering of an assembly that includes a gypsum roof board, which is letter F in the picture, under the waterproofing membrane and above the insulation down beneath the growing medium. So the ability for vegetative roofs, like I mentioned, to hold water really helps the building owner's efforts to minimize stormwater runoff. But on the flip side, it also adds considerable amount of weight to the roof assembly. And this could be potentially up to 200 pounds per square foot. So for this reason, choosing a cover board that has high marks and compressive strength can really help the assembly support that extra weight. So this is a really cool picture. This is a nice aerial shot of the Target Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which serves as the home for the city's NBA team, Go Timberwolves, and has hosted countless concerts, many other large events over the years. So the recent re-roof project included adding a vegetative system for the 115,000 square foot main area of the roof. And again, in order to add additional strength and extend the lifespan of the assembly, the consultant included in the specification a glass mat gypsum cover board. So now let's look at low slope roof design basics. So roofing, it's a big investment, and it protects an even bigger investment, when you consider the contents that are under the roof and the building itself. So these are really good reasons why durability in any roofing system is so important, because it directly translates into lower total cost of ownership, not only for the roof, but in some cases for the building. So if we look at basic roof design, so as a facility professional, you need to be aware, of how to increase the durability of your roof system, because this can help you make more strategic decisions instead of being reactive to problems in your roof and in your building as they come up. So basic roof design has 3 main elements. First one being the structural deck. You've got different material options there that can be steel, wood, concrete, poured gypsum even, not so common these days. Number 2 for sort of main elements is your insulation. Again, you have options for material choices, but polyiso is the most common today in commercial roof systems. And then number 3 is the membrane, which is your waterproofing layer. And again, you've got lots of different options for what you can use there, but single ply membranes are the biggest growing and the majority of what's being installed in roofs today. So what is a cover board? So a cover board, it goes by a few names, but it's installed below the waterproofing membrane and above the insulation. So the purpose for it is it provides support for the membrane, but it also protects the insulation below, which is very expensive, from storms. You know, it also protects from maintenance workers, whether it's, you know, we're thinking about dropped tools or wear and tear caused by them, you know, walking around from their boots. But the most important thing it does, it minimizes deterioration of other components in the roof. And what that does is that ultimately extends the life of the roof. So cover boards do come in different material types, but most commonly seen today are glass mat gypsum board or high density insulation boards, but there are also cement boards and asphaltic boards and some other options that are available out there. So where is it? So I already mentioned a little bit. The cover board is located between the membrane and the insulation, and it enhances the overall performance of the system. So as I also mentioned, it provides a nice rigid base to support the membrane. And the reason that's important is because when that membrane is adhered, so we call it adhered systems, it provides a great bonding surface for the membrane to stick to, one that doesn't flex and provides a lot of support for the membrane. So gypsum cover boards and roof boards are often used directly over the structural deck and under the insulation as thermal barriers. So in this location, they provide fire resistant benefits to the roofing system and make excellent substrates. So again, substrate, think foundation, or if you're using an air or vapor control layer in your roofing system, so otherwise known as air barriers or vapor retarders. And these are often directly adhered to the gypsum board in this position down in the thermal barrier. So you can see in this image, the black membrane there would be your thermal barrier, air barrier. That would be over the substrate board or thermal barrier. So, and also in this image, you can see that there is a gypsum board in both the cover board as well as the thermal barrier positions, with the green board at the top being the cover board. So all cover boards provide benefits to your roofing system. On this page, we're just highlighting and summarizing some of the main benefits of glass mat gypsum boards. So glass mat gypsum boards are just one kind of cover board, like I mentioned, that can benefit your roof system, but they're really known for their versatility to work in virtually any roofing system. They're approved in over 250,000 FM approved assemblies, and they improve the durability and resilience of your roofing system. So getting into cover board best practices. So prominent organizations that are in the professional roofing world have endorsed the use of cover boards going back to the 1970s. So the most prominent of these, the NRCA, or the National Roofing Contractors Association, has been recommending the use of cover boards since the 70s and have carried that recommendation through to this day. So since the 70s, when they first made their recommendations, several other prominent organizations, as you can see on the page here, in the building products industry have also recommended cover board use to their members. So some of the more, notable ones would be like the AIA, the American Institute of Architects. You've got IBHS on there, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, as well as even our friends to the north, the CRCA, the Canadian Roofing Contractors Association, just to name a few. So the statistics on this page are the result of a comprehensive study that we did a couple of years ago. The study was done by Ducker Associates on the use of cover boards in single ply roof design. So the results from the survey highlighted the importance of designing and installing, a really durable roof assembly. And it was interesting how consultants and contractors both saw the value in cover boards. So from the survey, both of them, professional building consultants as well as contractors, agreed that the use of cover boards when used in single ply roofing systems would increase the life expectancy anywhere from 6 to 7 years. So when we talked to consultants in a little more detail, we asked them about how they're mitigating their concerns with long-term durability of commercial roofing systems. And they said what they're doing is they're specifying more cover boards for use in their roofing systems. Specifically, they're specifying them at an elevated rate, and even more so when you look at single ply roofing systems, so 75 to 81%. So here's some interesting data. So in a roof system with a cover board, so if you look at the box in red in the top right there, the cover board is roughly 15% of the roof's material cost. It's just your roof system, and 10% of the overall roof cost if you consider labor and materials. Then consider the circle on the left there. The overall roof cost accounts for 5%, just 5% of the total building cost. Yet, and now look at the circle on the right, yet the roof represents 50% of all construction litigation cases. And now if you look at the circle in the center there, so over the life of a building, on average, 77% of capital expenditures for fixing problems in your building go to fixing the roof. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about, maybe saving a little money on your next roof system. So we've got an interesting quote from Robert Bensini, who's an attorney specializing in construction litigation. He commented that he estimates a full, quote, a full 15% of all new roofs fail within their first 6 years of service. These figures are a sober testament to the industry's preponderance of bargain basement generic roofing materials, sloppy installation, and ignored maintenance. So that was an interesting insight from him. So the key takeaway from this is spending a little more money on a good roof, can save you a lot of future construction related headaches. You may have insurance considerations. So many companies require FM approved roof systems. So FM approvals was formerly FM Global, which is a company, and then FM approvals branched off and became essentially a roof testing organization that helped inform their insurance company. And today they're sort of the de facto approval organization for roofing. But a lot of companies, like I said, require systems that are approved by FM. So FM classification primarily is concerned with roofing loss prevention issues. Things such as fire, wind uplift, foot traffic, and hail damage is another big one that they focus on. And as I already mentioned, cover boards are listed in hundreds of thousands of FM approved assemblies. And typically these are specified, and what you can see from the loss prevention sheets is they reduce risk to the loss prevention issues that I mentioned, primarily fire, wind, hail, and foot traffic, which is what they focus on. So why use a cover board? So we've given a few reasons, but let's go back a little bit here to where we were talking in the beginning. So this is some of those key insights that we were mentioning in the beginning that we got from facility professionals, the concerns and challenges, and these go anywhere from, how do I stay within my budget and control my costs, unforeseen money spent on repairs and maintenance, and, weather related damage to the building. So as I've, been showing you, cover boards can help mitigate many of these risks. So again, why should I use a cover board? So it's typically an extra step in the roofing process. It does add cost, and it's typically not required. So, but the truth is the benefits that a cover board brings to your building far outweighs the initial cost, and it extends the life of your roof. So if any of these benefits that you can look on the right side of the page here sound like something that would be of interest to you or your roofing system, consider a cover board for your next roof. And we'll get into this a little more. So looking a bit more at these categories for cover board benefits, here you can see some of the risks that are mitigated by including a cover board in your assembly for these different risk categories. So if you look under puncture and hail, cover boards increase the puncture resistance of the system, and they help protect the membrane and the overall assembly from things even like foot traffic related to maintenance that's up on your rooftop. And they also help from, the other big puncture category is risks like hail. So under insulation preservation, Cover boards protect the insulation, again, foot traffic and weather conditions, and they also help preserve the insulation R value and energy efficiency and prevent the insulation from being crushed or damaged. Again, foot traffic is your likely culprit there, and most often what causes that. Wind uplift protection. Cover boards enhance the roof's resistance to wind, and these high winds that can occur can literally lift your roof off the system, which is why it's called wind uplift. So when that happens, these are definitely expensive repairs that you would want to avoid. And then fire resistance. This is an important consideration, in just about every building. And gypsum boards provide a natural fire resistant layer in your system. We'll talk a little more about that in a minute. Next, looking at benefits versus cost. So again, earlier in the presentation, I mentioned the third-party assessment that was conducted by FMI Corporation, where we looked at single-ply roofing systems that have been replaced in the last 5 years. The study they concluded that using a cover board on a single-ply roofing system could save anywhere from $30,000 to $55,000 on maintenance costs over 20 years. So in this study, detailed roof data was collected from owners, from facility managers, as well as from property managers. So the roof data, like I mentioned, it was specific to single-ply membrane systems. And in those systems, roughly half of those included a cover board in the assembly and the other half did not. So in total, quantitative data was collected on 123 roofs from 38 states. So another interesting conclusion from the study was that roofs with a cover board were far more likely to meet the owner's life expectancy for the roof. So of the roofs with a cover board that did not meet owner's life expectancy, which there was 8 of them that had a cover board, 4 of those that didn't meet life expectancy actually surpassed the warranty life. So if those have been included in the numbers, then 93% of roofs with a cover board would have met life expectancy. So that would be a pretty good batting average, especially compared to roofs without a cover board, where just over half met the owner's life expectancy for the roof. And then on average, another takeaway from the study was that roofs that included a cover board lasted approximately 4 years longer than systems that did not have a cover board. So the FMI study concluded that the use of a cover board provides several advantages, especially in single-ply roofing systems, both from a financial perspective as well as part of just a good risk mitigation strategy. So the key factors that led to these conclusions were, number one, extended lifespan. So systems with a cover board experienced roughly a 20% longer life. And then they were also much more likely to meet the life expectancy requirements that the building operators had in mind. Number two is reduced risk profiles. So roofs without a cover board have the potential experience over 50% greater annual costs, associated with damages, leaks, repairs, and just even regular maintenance. Coverboard equipped roofs also experienced less impact from foot traffic on the roof surface and less damage from other sources as well. And the number three that led to their was lower life cycle cost. So even though the initial installed cost of a roofing system with a cover board is more expensive than it is without, the total life cycle cost is actually considerably less. Roofs without a cover board experience, increased and usually or often highly variable annual operating costs depending on what kind of problems may be going on, and they generally have lower lifespans. So these are the two big, contributing factors that lead to total cost being considerably greater for a roof without a cover board that cost more initially. So looking at performance, and we'll look at why cover boards are your roof's best friend when we're talking about puncture and hail. So punctures on a roof system are one of, if not the most common problem that's encountered on a low slope roof. So they can happen during building or roof construction. They can happen due to ongoing maintenance traffic on the roof, or as a result of storms or weather. or even poor installation of the roof. So the building in this picture shows a roof area that's being used to stage quite a few products. So, when you look at this and you ask yourself the question, could there be an elevated risk for roof damage or puncture, when you got all this equipment up there and you obviously are going to have a lot of people working on it, you bet there's going to be an elevated risk, whether this is a roof that's being constructed or whether they're doing projects within the building. There's always risk when you have workers up on a roof, whether just doing a capital project or installation, or whether they're just up there servicing equipment on the roof. So risk definitely elevated during roof construction, in a situation like this, but it's a risk anytime a roof is used to keep equipment or have people up there for any reason. So cover boards, like I said, they definitely help protect your roof system from punctures. Here you can see some of the common causes for punctures on roof systems. Again, like I just said, foot traffic and human caused punctures are by far the most common. These punctures are often found, where maintenance workers access the roof. So if there's a roof hatch or an access door, typically at those entry points, and then also where they typically perform their work or set their toolboxes down. So if there's HVAC equipment or some other equipment up there, that's often where punctures will be found. Hail, that's the one that most people know to be afraid of if you've ever experienced a serious hailstorm, or if you're in an area that gets hail on a regular basis. So in addition to hail, we don't have it on here, but windstorms can also cause punctures from flying debris, and they can even dislodge HVAC or solar panels. And dislodged equipment on the roof is actually a very common cause for punctures when you experience a high wind event. And just to summarize again, cover boards can enhance the puncture resistance of your roof assembly and mitigate many of these risks. So this data is on rooftop equipment from the Department of Energy's 2012 Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey. So what they concluded was that 2 out of 3 low-slope roofs host some sort of rooftop equipment, whether it's HVAC or something else. That means that maintenance, service calls, regular inspections, these all create foot traffic on your roof. So many of these folks that go up there, they're not even aware of the wear and tear, not to mention the potential damage that's caused by, whether it's just their boots walking around, if they're not walking off footpaths that are reinforced, or, if they set their toolboxes down, or if they drop tools or pull panels off of HVAC units. We've heard from waterproofing repair experts that those are common areas where they put panels down onto a single ply membrane and they set them down a little too rough and cause punctures. But so again, maintenance related punctures, very common. Rigid cover boards increase the puncture resistance of your waterproofing membranes, and that can help mitigate this risk of this increased traffic with increased equipment up there. So this image gives a nice visual on, what you can often see on rooftops with maintenance-related foot traffic. The black dotted line is the reinforced walk path. That's the way you'd want folks to go, but unless you're going, to work on the equipment in that top right corner, the guy's probably not going that way. Tools are heavy. Guys may have had to walk up a few flights of stairs to get up there. So, they're likely going to be looking for the shortest path. So, for instance, the red dotted line would be the shortest route for a guy if he's heading to that large cream or rust-colored box that you see there and whatever equipment's in there. And from what we've seen, human nature shows that's the way he will go. So extreme weather may not be a major risk factor where your building is, but people accessing your roof are always a significant factor regardless of your location. And if you have a lot of equipment on your roof, your risk increases substantially. So depending on where you live, hail may or may not be a significant risk factor for you. So roofing systems insured by FM Global, or these days a lot of roofs are just designed to meet FM requirements, and even though they're not insured by them, must use tested and classified systems that meet one of these 3 categories that FM defines as moderate hail, severe hail, or they have a new category of very severe hail right there in the center of the country. So if you're in that dark gray area on the map, you may be at elevated risk of encountering what FM Global refers to as very severe hail, and you may want to look at installing a very, very severe hail rated system for your next roofing project. Just to put in perspective what these different moderate, severe, and very severe hail resistance classifications mean, sort of to put a visual to it. So this shows the different levels of hail resistance relative to the diameter of the hail ball. So the quarter is roughly the moderate hail, golf ball would be roughly the size of severe hail, and then the 8-ball would be your very severe hail. So most very severe hail rated systems, and it could be all of them from what I've been able to see, do include a cover board to meet that level of resistance. By including good rigid quality cover board in your system, hailstorm concerns can be something that becomes much less of a concern or a thing of the past for you. So fire resistance. So this is hopefully less frequent, but very potentially very catastrophic event is fire. So the fire resistance of your roof assembly is always important, and it can be enhanced by cover boards and thermal barriers. So we mentioned the best practice call out by the NRCA since the 70s. So the NRCA, again, National Roofing Contractors Association, recommends the inclusion of non-combustible cover boards. So non-combustible, think that means won't burn, for mechanically attached single ply roof systems. So glass mat gypsum roof boards and cover boards are today, and really have been for the last 30 years, considered the premier non-combustible roof board. So what's so special about gypsum? So a lot actually, but the real magic is how gypsum resists fire. So gypsum, by molecular structure, contains 2 molecules of water for each molecule of calcium sulfate. So it literally contains chemically combined water. So what that means is the gypsum will slowly release these molecules of water as steam or water vapor if it gets heated by a fire. So it'll continue to do this, and it'll release all that water, as long as it's being, exposed to the heat of a fire, until no water molecules are left. So this is what provides gypsum's unique ability to resist fire and flame. So I mentioned it's naturally fire resistant and non-combustible. Again, gypsum won't burn. So what's interesting here is those 2 water molecules that we just talked about actually account for 21% of the weight of gypsum. So to put that in perspective, if you look at a 5/8 inch 4 foot by 8 foot gypsum panel, it contains the crystallized equivalent of 2 gallons of liquid water. So you sort of have a little bit of built-in fire resistance, in your gypsum panels. And that's the magic of gypsum. So roof boards, like cover boards and thermal barriers, so they provide 2 different kinds of fire resistance, and that's primarily driven by their location in the roof assembly. A cover board provides fire protection from outside sources. So think burning embers from a nearby building that's on fire, or if you got a forest fire that's spewing up embers and they're landing, on buildings that are in the area. This is where a cover board will help, prevent your roof from catching fire from these sort of things. And then gypsum thermal barriers provide fire resistance to the assembly, so to the roof assembly itself, to protect from fire within the building. So if you have a building fire within, it ensures that your roof assembly won't, contribute fuel to the fire. Next, we'll look at wind uplift. Cover boards do provide significant benefits to roof systems in high winds. So cover boards strengthen the roof assembly, and by doing that, they enhance the uplift resistance. They also provide a great bonding surface for the waterproofing membrane, which helps reduce delamination risk. They increase the stiffness of the overall roof structure. They add structural integrity to the system. And as mentioned before, they help protect against punctures. So then, again, things like from flying debris, tree branches, or again, rooftop equipment that gets dislodged. So this is one of the famous images of wind-related roof damage. This was all over CNN and on every nightly news in the country back in 2005. So this aerial photograph is of the Louisiana Superdome in the New Orleans Arena after Hurricane Katrina and the devastation that it brought. So the Superdome, which did not include a cover board, obviously endured a complete loss when it came to the roof. So when you compare that to the New Orleans Arena, which used a glass mat gypsum cover board, and did not experience any noticeable damage. So is this a completely fair comparison? Of course not. So even though both of these roofs were experienced the same storm, the Superdome, it's a much larger roof surface. It's at a different pitch, it's at a different height, and it had a different type of roof system on it. But the contrast and the level of damage is just so stark when you look at these two buildings that it stands as a great visual representation of how a gypsum cover board can enhance the roof assembly's wind uplift performance. So looking at sound, acoustics, and sound transmission can also be enhanced by using gypsum cover boards. And higher density cover boards like glass mat gypsum panels provide enhanced acoustic benefits to pretty much any roofing assembly. So although sound transmission properties of a roofing system are not really part of the physical protection of the roof, sound transmission does affect the quality of life inside the building. So reducing the noise from traffic, equipment, and aircraft noise can be a vital function of the system. So by adding one or more layers of a high density material into your roof system can really help attenuate and absorb these outside noises, and it can help significantly increase the STC or the sound transmission class of your roof assembly. So gypsum boards and mineral wool insulation are commonly used either separately or in combination for especially enhanced acoustic performance in roof systems. They do this very well due to their density and their sound absorptive properties. So these are other considerations if you're looking to meet a sound transmission class or looking to reduce the noise inside of your building because of outside noise sources. Looking at cover boards and especially gypsum or other high density boards can really enhance the sound performance of your roof. So if you look at how they're designed and even how STC is calculated here, so adding high density boards can increase the sound isolation. So this example shows a 38 STC rated roof assembly that incorporates a 5/8 inch glass mat gypsum panel as a cover board as well as in thermal barrier position. So at the top and at the bottom of that image there. So to calculate the STC, you look at the outside noise source, which is 65 dB being reduced down to 27 dB. So it becomes a simple subtraction equation. 65 minus 27 is 38, and that 38 is your sound transmission class. So if you wanted to increase that 38 STC, this is where you would change materials or add materials to your roof assembly by going with higher density materials, whether you're adding more layers of high density boards or going with a more dense insulation like mineral wool, you can further increase the STC of your roof assembly. Oh, actually, this is the image that I meant to be showing here, but this is where you can see the 38 STC coming from 65 minus 27. Apologize for that. Moving into insulation preservation. So insulation, it's used in roofing systems. It typically has a life expectancy of around 50 years. Most roof systems last anywhere from 15 to 25 years. So you don't have to be a math wizard to figure out that you're going to go through multiple roof systems during the potential life cycle of your insulation. So since your insulation is the most expensive component in your roof system and has a life expectancy of anywhere at least 2 to 3 systems, definitely makes a lot of sense to protect it and preserve it for use in more than one roof assembly. So insulation in most roofing systems today is typically polyisocyanurate, but it could also be things like expanded or extruded polystyrene or even mineral wool. And like I've said, it is the most expensive component. It has a life expectancy of roughly 50 years. Roofing systems last much less than that. So insulation, if it gets damaged or it gets wet, it must be replaced when re-roofing. So if that happens, that increases the cost of replacing your roof. On the flip side, if you keep it in good shape and protect it, it can be reused, which will help reduce the cost of your re-roofing project. So again, 50-year potential life makes a lot of good sense to protect that insulation with a rigid cover board. So that concludes the presentation section of the program. I hope that you got something from the information today, and when your next roofing project comes up, you remember that a cover board can help you extend the life of your roof, reduce the cost of ownership, and give you peace of mind by reducing risks that threaten your roof. So thank you for your attention, and Amy, back to you for any questions that we may have gotten.
Yes, thank you, Michael, very much for that great presentation. Just a reminder to the audience, if you do have a question for Michael, please feel free to use the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen and type in your question. We do have a few that have come in during the presentation. Michael, can a cover board be installed to an existing roof, or is this only for new construction?
No, it can definitely be installed to an existing roof, but this would typically be done in a re-roofing situation where you are going over the top of a roof where you have a waterproofing membrane, and often that that can sometimes mean just adding another cover board and another waterproofing membrane. And again, you would do this when your waterproofing membrane is beyond its life and is looking to be replaced, but that would be what's called a re-roof. But you can absolutely use it also in new construction projects, but re-roofing as well. But you would not add this to an existing roof system if you had a good functioning roof with a good functioning waterproofing membrane, if that answers the question about 3 different ways, I think.
Perfect, yeah. And we did have a question on, does the cover board have to be replaced when you replace the membrane? So I think you answered that one as well. Is the cover board a building requirement, or is it an optional element just in general?
It is not a building requirement. It is typically considered an optional, a part of the roofing system. But what it can do is, depending on what sort of performance levels that you are looking to meet, whether that's wind or hail or fire resistance, or even, like I mentioned, for foot traffic, it can offset different things. So you could have a roofing system without a cover board that would require far more mechanical fasteners to hold the roof system down to your steel deck. Whereas if you have that same sort of performance requirement for wind, you can install a rigid cover board and reduce that number of fasteners that go into your roofing system, in addition to gaining the other benefits that we've been talking about in the presentation.
Perfect. Michael, do you know, does UL or NFPA see gypsum board as non-combustible?
They do. They are FM and UL considered gypsum boards to be non-combustible.
Great. And then can you add, can a cover be added on top of a temporary waterproofing membrane?
So what is often done is gypsum boards can be used as substrates for temporary roofs. What is often happening often in new construction, where they will install the steel deck and they will install a thermal barrier or cover board directly to the deck, and then they will go over that with a good vapor retarder, which will then act as a temporary roof while the building is dried in and construction can begin inside of a building. That's often done.
Great. Next question is, would you say cover board and aggregated ballast serve the same purpose?
I'm sorry?
This question was, would you say cover board and aggregated ballast serve the same purpose?
No, so aggregated ballast actually acts as, your fastener, so to speak. So aggregated ballast is typically put over an EPDM membrane, and what that does is that replaces you having to use adhesives to hold the membrane to the assembly, or having to use mechanical fasteners of some sort to hold the membrane to the assembly. So the ballast acts as the weight that essentially holds the rest of the materials below in place, as opposed to having to use adhesives or mechanical fasteners. The cover board goes beneath the waterproofing membrane and can be used to adhere the rest of the system to the steel deck, or it can be adhered as part of the overall assembly as one.
Perfect. Michael, do you know, does adding cover board affect insurance costs in a positive way with the fire protection and some of the other resistance to natural disasters?
There's no standard for that, but we have heard that there are potential situations, depending on the contents of your building and the risk factor involved with your building, for impacting insurance premiums, especially in hail regions as well as in high wind regions.
Wonderful. And then we have a question regarding the puncture resistance. Does the cover only reduce the severity of punctures, say dropping a tool, and not necessarily eliminating the risk of a puncture?
What it does is it increases the puncture resistance of the overall system. So by providing a rigid substrate underneath the membrane, as opposed to if you drop something heavy, or even if you think of hail coming down, where the membrane, instead of being allowed to deflect and actually deflect and take whatever is pushing on it, having that solid substrate, it increases the level of pressure that would be required to puncture the membrane. So in testing that we did a few years ago, by adding a gypsum cover board under a single ply membrane, even a 1/4 inch cover board, it increased the puncture resistance of the membrane by 50 to 70%. So it actually makes the membrane more resistant to being punctured, which will keep moisture out and avoid problems.
Wonderful. Michael, we've got a question. What is special about a GP cover board versus, another manufacturer, a different type of cover board?
Well, Georgia Pacific, we invented the cover board. So DensDeck has been around since 1987. We have been continually innovating over our 30+ years of history. We currently have 3 different products. We have a DensDeck product for mechanically fastened system, our DensDeck Prime product for adhered systems, and that has a new patented technology called ionic technology, which really sets it apart from others in the category by doubling the moisture resistance and preserving the strength properties of the board in extreme environments. And now we have introduced a 3rd and a brand new product to the marketplace, DensDeck StormX, which is the first and only product that meets the first and only gypsum cover board that meets the new FM very severe hail requirement under single ply membrane. So we're very excited about that, and we are the only manufacturer that has a product that meets that level of hail resistance. So we feel we have very good products, and other manufacturers do make nice products as well, but we feel that we have products that can help customers and are superior to many of the other alternatives.
Great, and I just want to do a little addition to this question. I didn't finish reading it, so they were talking about using a board made of gypsum or homogeneous boards like fiber cement or bonded boards. So if there's anything further you wanted to discuss about those different items.
So by bonded boards, I'm assuming they mean boards that are already laminated to insulation or something along those lines. Cement boards, if that's what was being referred to, or if we're talking wood fiber boards have been considered a lower cost alternative. They are actually what gypsum boards were designed to replace, just for the advantages when it comes to fiber resistance or fire resistance, as well as water resistance and overall strength and performance in a roofing assembly. There are also cement board alternatives, which are considered heavier alternatives. They do have some good applications, but gypsum boards are by far, especially glass mat gypsum boards, are considered the most versatile boards. They essentially can work in any roofing system, in any sort of application or installation method.
And I think you kind of mentioned this in your answer to the last question, but we've been focusing on gypsum boards a little bit. But I know that Georgia Pacific offers other products to meet the cover board criteria, correct?
We do make the 3 products that I mentioned, and those are the DensDeck for mechanically fastened systems, the DensDeck Prime for adhered systems primarily, and then the DensDeck StormX Prime, which is for very severe hail rated in any sort of high extreme uplift or foot traffic scenarios. But they are all gypsum based. Perfect.
And then out of the different sources of damage that you shared today, where do most facility managers see like the highest risk?
Well, it depends on, a little bit depends on the building and what's up on your roof, but the most common issues that come up are related to foot traffic on the roof and just punctures. So punctures, think moisture, water getting into your roof, whether that requires just replacing a section of your roof or whether it becomes a bigger problem and creates problems inside of the building with the water intrusion getting into there. But that's the most common. It's typically not as big of an issue. And then hailstorms are another one that is becoming a hot topic in the sort of the tornado alley center part of the country. But the most common issue that people deal with is punctures related to foot traffic.
Wonderful. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions from the audience. Michael, any last final words you'd like to share with the audience today?
No, I think I've said enough. I appreciate everybody. I appreciate everyone's time.
Well, thank you again, Michael and Georgia Pacific, for putting on this excellent presentation today. Thank you all for attending. Just a reminder, you'll receive an email after today's webcast. It probably will hit your inboxes tomorrow morning with a copy of the slides, and the archive can be found at facilitiesnet.com/webcast. Thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful day.